the early days of capitalism. What was so famous in England at that time?
I was going to say monarchy.
What is it?
Monarchy.
Okay.
The Industrial Revolution.
The Industrial Revolution is an outcome of capitalism, but there was a specific, historic event. You're a Marxist, I'm not going to ask you. You might know the answer. Anybody else raise your hand? Okay, I'll come to you now if you raise your hand, right? No? Yes?
Is the discovery of gold in the New World?
Gold? No. Gold was discovered way before, but eventually, yes. Eventually, that was the concept of imperialism. But there's a specific thing that was happening in England at that time, in the 16th century.
Was it the Enlightenment?
Enlightenment was, I will talk about it, it's like more of like the philosophy of it. You're right, but I'm talking about like a specific historic event that took place. Oh, I see a lot of three systems at the same time. Yes?
Was it when Christianity divided in England?
I'll talk about that, but that's not the main event. It's an economic event.
I was raising my hand.
We're doing the same thing?
No. I was just thinking that like the opening of the trade routes between the British.
You're getting there, but there's specific trade. What was the famous trade in England in the 16th century? Not tea.
Spices.
No. English don't know spice.
Might be wrong. Is it the state trade?
No. Okay. Last time? No. Alright, the main historic trade that started capitalism, according to some scholars, is the wool trade. The concept behind it, and this is why a lot of people say that Marxism might not be the right analytical framework for capitalism, is because the reason why capitalism started in England, and a lot of scholars argue that specific trade, the wool trade, was, everybody knows what wool trade is, right? Anybody needs definition? We live in the 22nd century now, so we don't know these things anymore. Oh, sure. Thank you for being for asking. So wool trade was like when you have like the wool out of sheep. It's how you create fabrics and clothing. And, it's like literally the wool of the sheep. When you take the wool and you create fabrics with it, that's literally what it is. And it goes back to the concept of industrialization and modernity, where people wanted clothing, wanted beddings, wanted to be more modernized. So the wool trade was kicking off humongously. And English realized that it was a guaranteed success. If you have a wool, if you're engaged in a wool trade, then you made money. So what that happened in England, what it created, that it destroyed farmers. It destroyed the concept of farming. Because everybody at that time was farming for one reason, which is to make money, right? Now, when you create a cheat code and say, you know what, farming is too difficult, let's create something else, or there's another opportunity, which is wool trade. If you raise some sheep easily, take their wool and sell it, you make a lot of money. So everybody and their mother created wool trade business. What that created, it destroyed or dismantled the concept of peasancy, the concept of farmers, the concept of villages. And this is why English, the concept of villages was almost destroyed at that time. Everybody went to a city, everybody went to town to create that business and to be involved in it. So nobody needed farmers anymore. People needed shepherds. And all of that business was happening in the city itself. And this changed the social, economic, positioning of people in England. This is what created in the same less than 100 years after, we have the so-called English Revolution, where the bourgeoisie wanted to have more control of politics because they gained a lot of money. Now you have to understand, bourgeoisie doesn't mean the elite class. Bourgeoisie means the middle class, the ones that benefits from both, from being in cahoots with the peasants because they feel like they're the underdogs, but they are in cahoots with the elites because they aspire to be the elites. And the best way to look at them are like middle management in corporate America, the ones who connect the dots. And they become eventually very important in the concept of democracy. The concept of voting was bourgeoisie, according to a lot of political scientists, are without bourgeoisie class, there would be no democracy. Because the peasants will eventually revolt. And this is what happened where why was English, and this is a segue, but why was the English Revolution happening in the 17th century, but the revolution happened in Germany or France later and Russia later? Because of this problem. Because peasants continued in the rest of Europe with the exception of England. England, the peasants transformed into becoming the proletariat, the people who work in the factories in England. So the concept of peasants didn't exist. And who were mostly affected because of this change in the world trade was the bourgeoisie. They had a lot of money, now they're building class, but now they want power. When you have so much power, so much money, what is the first thing you're going to think about? Power, class. And the small aspect of things, I know we are in a masjid, so let's keep this a secret, but a lot of people, when they become rich, they start want to be in boards of masajid and schools and Muslim organizations. Why? I mean, a lot of them have great intentions, but there are a couple of people who want to buy what? Class and power. And this is why in America, the concept of lobbying is important. Why? Because it's not just about voting, it's about if you have money, your money is more important than votes. So this is why in England the revolution happened, because bourgeoisie made a lot of money, but that money didn't translate to power, and this is why they revolted against the elites and the monarchy, and eventually the parliament that took place was a creation of the bourgeoisie. Now the peasants, that class was destroyed, so it was not that much relevant. Now the reason why I mention all of this, and this historical lesson is not just to talk about something that is not relevant. It's actually very relevant to our conversation today. Because that is what a lot of political scientists and economic scientists argue, that the creation of capitalism was created specifically from that event. Now, this is oversimplification. We know in history, we have such major theories and systems, it takes time, right? Even Islamic history, Islamic science, systems, Islamic philosophy, it took centuries for it to evolve to where we are today. As we know, fiqh was not created in the times of the Prophet ﷺ or during his companions, right? It was created later on with Shafi'i and other big scholars, maybe 100 years after. It takes time for things to build up and it becomes a theory and a philosophy. So accordingly, capitalism was created as a starting point from there. Meaning that now, what can we do to build more power by making more money? Irrelevant of the impact it has on the society and the impact it has on nature. As I mentioned here, when you have the whole state, all of England is trying to get involved in that hustle, which is the world trade. They ignored farming, they ignored factories, they ignored everything else, and everybody jumped to world trade. That had significant impact on society, had significant impact on how people see themselves or how people communicate with each other. Now, instead of it becoming where people are collaborating when it comes to sciences and arts and having extended families, it's about how can I make money, and how can I help translate that money into power, which what created the English Revolution. Now, this is a simplistic idea of capitalism. The idea is, can we make money? What makes us more money? Irrelevant of the consequences it has on society. Later on, when Europe was involved in what we know, and I'm going to be walking us through history to walk us to get to us to where we are today. But that world trade, 100 years after, in exactly 1618, what took place in Europe? Very significant problem. One of you mentioned it here, I think. What happened in Europe in 1618? You have to know that. Something has to do with religion. It does, absolutely. Before that. Before the separation. What caused the separation? The 30 Years' War of what? 30-year war between the Protestant and the Catholic Church. And this was, a lot of scholars argue that the concept of secularism and the concept of modernity, that I'll be talking about in a bit, was technically created was in the inception of it, of these arguments, were started there. Meaning, in short, in such a quick summary, the 30-year war between 1618 and 1648, the concept was the Protestant as the new capitalist mindset, the people that realized that the Catholic Church has monopoly on power, and on money. And to them, because Catholic Church were very oppressive, they used to sell you your seat in heaven, right? You have to pay money and then we guarantee you go to heaven. So everything, like the whole Catholic Church has become very corrupt. So the concept again was, there's a fight between the Protestant and the new reform of Christianity, right? This war eventually led to the concept or a treaty called Westphalia Treaty. Westphalia Treaty was the main event in European history where they agreed together that the time of us internally to fight is over. We need to create the concept of sovereignty of states. And this was the creation of what we know today as modern nation state. This is the definition of why we have France and Germany, all of these places. They agreed internally that we're going to be divided, and then we're going to be focused outside in expanding our states. And this is, a lot of people argue that this is the creation where colonialism, the mindset of colonialism started. 100 years after, there's a new concept, a new treaty called the New Utrecht Treaty, which is the idea that European powers decided that it's time for us to extend even further. Let's start colonizing all the way to in the 19th century, the concept of Berlin Conference, which European powers decided together that you're gonna go and let's divide Africa between us and divide the world and start colonizing and taking over. Now, the reason I mention all of these histories is because all of them are very much connected. In the sense of, the brother in the back talked about enlightenment, right? The concept of enlightenment and before that we have the Renaissance, and eventually it led to modernity. These ideas are essential in our conversation of the concept of the separation of the so-called religion and church. Now, that's a very simplistic term because that's not what secularism is about. Secularism is the concept of what? Of removing the effects of organized religion from the common life. Meaning that in the early stages, people used to argue that as long as you keep your religion between you and your God, it's okay. You can live any way you see fit. Eventually, they realized that's problematic. Because if you have an organized religion that tells you how to spend your money, how to earn your money, then that's a problem to the modern nation states, and that's a problem, a threat to capitalism. And you might see me here throwing a lot of terms instead of just talking about capitalism. And I'm doing this intentionally to show you that capitalism is not just an economic system that exists based on riba, based on interest, and based on usury. Sure, that's the simplest way for us to argue that capitalism is bad. Because Islamically, riba is forbidden. It's not always forbidden, it's one of the kaba'ir, it's one of the capital diseases that we have. But capitalism is only the economic system that was developed with a larger philosophical worldview that erupted in Europe following the 16th century. Meaning all we know today about the Renaissance, right? The concept of art and science and the discovery and so-called discovery of America in 1492, all of that led to the concept of what? Enlightenment. What is enlightenment? Anybody can enlighten us by explaining what that means? Any quick answers? Sure.
It was the idea that divine right doesn't exist.
That's one of the concepts, sure. Anybody else? Okay, so make it quick, yeah.
I was gonna say, critical thinking and reasoning over just like what you're being told.
100%. So enlightenment after.
Yeah, I was going to say the recognition and implementation of new ideas and new.
Absolutely. So if you study European history, Joe, and most of you I think studied it in school, you go from what Renaissance, pre-modernity, or Middle Ages, Renaissance, Enlightenment, and then modernity, right? This is how we study European history. And in essence, this is how we study, unfortunately, or how we have to understand the world today. Because unfortunately, as a cause of imperialism, everybody around the world is forced to see themselves and see the world through this lens of European philosophical upbringing that took place since the 16th century. So the Renaissance was the discovery and the art and the science and the beauty and the divine and all of that, the nature. And then Enlightenment, when it came exactly what you mentioned, the concept of replacing the divine and the tradition in the traditional wisdom with so-called critical thinking. Meaning that what I think according to my own brain, according to my own consciousness, what I think comes first than what tradition tells me. And by tradition is a key word for what? Is divine and religion. Because in the early stages it's hard to go say, oh, you know what, let's get rid of religion. You would say, our tradition might be a little bit backward. When we talk about organized marriage, what is the first thing you think about in the West?
Force.
Backwardness, right? Even though organized marriage is not as well, people think, unfortunately, because of how the West sees us, organized religion as well. I'm a father or a mother most of the time. I find my sister, like my son, I did him married with a woman that he has never seen in his life, and I just throw him in a house, and now that's the organized religion. That's not how organized religion is. We know our culture, that's not how it works. We know Islamically, we have the khutbah, right? The engagement period, which was prescribed upon us by the Prophet, so we might know each other. Now, if some nations and different ethnicities and different groups have a little bit different dynamics, doesn't mean it's bad, it's just how they do it. Now, does that mean certain things happen are wrong? Absolutely. Does that mean sometimes women are forced to marry someone they don't want? Absolutely, that exists. But that's not because of our tradition. That's because of people sometimes being oppressive to their loved ones. And at the end of the day, I can come back to this later, this was actually forced by European powers, specifically the Napoleon Code of Family in 1804. The concept of making women being an object to their husbands. And this, until today, unfortunately, all of our Muslim countries are based on that law, whether we know it or not. But anyways, to go back to the topic, so when we are talking about enlightenment, we're talking about modernity, we talk about the concept of and there's the transformation of society at large to exclude tradition, religion, and religious values on all levels, on social, on philosophical, and economic. When you have a concept and you have a system in Europe, a process to transform society, and I just gave you an example of the world trade, right? The world trade was an example of how the whole society of England was transformed because of one business. It killed a couple of classes, it transformed the bourgeoisie from a working class to like a middle management class, and one in power, and then eventually to revolution, and then led to them having power in the parliament. So in essence, that enlightenment as a core project basically is a displacement of the faith-based morality by rationally based morality. And this is what we have today. That concept of what? The best example, we talk about it all the time, is the concept of love is love, right? What we know today in society when it comes to sexuality is that as long as the concept of no harm, which is a European idea, as long as there is no physical harm, no psychological harm, and recently the concept of psychological harm is becoming very famous now, right? Specifically, we talk about domestic violence, right? The concept of you don't have to hit a woman, you can psychologically abuse her, and that in itself is harmful. But all these things are becoming mostly recent. But in general, in a Western mindset, in a Western worldview, as long as there's no physical harm or psychological harm to the other person, you can do as you wish. Now, the problem with that is that it goes back to what I mentioned. Creating a concept that you're transforming, you're replacing the transcendental God and the divine and the rules and the morality and the ethics and the philosophy and the worldview of the transcendental God with a man-made God. That man-made God is what? Is the state. Meaning that now, we as Muslims, and this is one of the reasons why we are oppressed as a group, because we as Muslims have a problem. And you know, we don't have uncles here, so I can say this freely, because they always talk about the concept of assimilation, right? We are American Muslims. In essence, I don't think that's possible. You can, to be honest with you, and I'm not saying this from a political sense, that because of Americans' wars overseas, that's another topic. But in essence, being an American, being a European, meaning that you have to abide by the European worldview. You have to abide by the philosophy that man-made rules come before the divine rules. In essence, our very existence as Muslims, it's a contradiction to enlightenment. It's a contradiction to the so-called free thought and critical thinking and the theories of replacing tradition and religion by man-made or by rationally based morality. When you have a morality that is liquid, right? There's a term in philosophy that is called, if you studied like the concept of liquid love or liquid modernity, right? Then it's not hard. Meaning it's not something like it's something that keeps changing according to what we think now is rational. And there's many examples of this. Like when we talk about certain things in Islam back in the day, when they say, for example, even when we say about fasting. Fasting, in essence, if you think someone who's rational will tell you, why the hell do you fast? What do you mean? Like, I know in simplistic terms we fall and make the mistake of saying, why do we fast? The first thing that comes to mind when we are children is what? So we can feel with the poor. Right? Isn't that the first thing you learn as a young kid? We fast, okay, so when I grew up I started asking my mom, why do the poor fast now? To feel with who? So this is important conversation. When we pray, we have the WhatsApp uncles and aunts, they send messages, if you wake up for Fajr in the morning, the breeze outside does something chemically to your brain, and when you fast and prostate and do ruku' and sujood, there's specific muscles that are moved and they move them, then this is good for your health. We come up with what? We try to explain Salah and Siyam by using what? Rational thinking. So you see, even when we are trying to defend Islam, we use the world's views that are anti-Islam to begin with. We try to prove Islam by using what? Saying, Quran is full of scientific miracles. Then Islam is correct. Okay, what if, like 20 years from now, or 50 years from now, whatever was mentioned in the Quran scientifically is proven to be wrong? What's going to happen? What are we going to do? Are we going to say, maybe God was talking to specific people, but he didn't? What are we going to explain it? And so this is the problem. When we are replacing something that is divine, that is transcendental, something that comes from God, from someone who's not a human being, their rational is different than us, something we cannot comprehend. When you replace that with something that is rationally based, meaning that it will continue to change. And this is why capitalism keeps changing. And when you talked about the Marxist idea of the means of production, technically speaking, nowadays in the new flavor of capitalism, it's not about production anymore, is it? It's about data now, right? This is how if you go 100 years ago and you tell people that Facebook will be making billions of dollars just by knowing who you are and the things you say online, they'll be like, what? What does that mean? How? That's not comprehensible. So again, when you have a rationally based morality, it continues to change. That means that the society itself doesn't have a core or a hard morality that is defined by someone else that is understanding this world a little bit better than us. Now, this again, it's important because it takes us back, I mentioned all of this to come back to capitalism today, is that what we have today as capitalism, and this is why I didn't really define it in a specific terms, because I don't think it's important for us to define capitalism, because you can go back to Marx, the concept of capital, right? That capital, I appreciate it. When you go to the book of Marx, when he unpacked and dismantled capitalism, was like the capital, like he explained, but it's about the money, it's about the accumulation of wealth, which we know Islamically is wrong, it's haram. You can't, I don't want to say it's haram, but the guidelines of finance and economy in Islam is against accumulation of wealth. How? What is the means to that? The tool to stop wealth accumulation? Zakat. Zakat means that if you have the money standing idling in your bank, you have to pay money every single year, 2.5% every single year. So the way to avoid paying zakat that much is to do what? Is to invest that money. But in capitalism, the idea is that you throw your money in the bank, and the bank will be giving you 10%, 50%, 8% every year by idling and not being invested in society. Now, when we say that capitalism is harmful, and we say that capitalism is dangerous. Knowing what I just mentioned today about the philosophical Western ideas of modernity and enlightenment, the concept of replacing transcendental God with the man-made God, replacing faith-based ethics with rationally based ethics, is that capitalism becomes, what Muhammad mentioned, profitability by any means necessary. Meaning, you have an iPhone that costs $1,000, it's okay that there's a sweat shops in China where people are getting paid less than $1 a day. It's okay for you. Why? Because, come on, I'm paying charity using my iPhone, it's okay. You know, I'm sending money to Gaza by using my iPhone. If I don't have an iPhone, I won't be doing that. I can't be successful in my work if I don't wear some clothing that is made in Bangladesh that might be costing you a couple $100, but it costs 50 cents in Bangladesh. You start rationalizing these things because of the rationally based ethics and morality that I just mentioned. You start thinking, and this is something very important. When we talk about diseases that exist in society, when we talk about, for example, what we know as, or what is known in socio-economic terms as the doctrine of progress, meaning that when you have a disease, for example, let's take a simple disease and a crazy disease. When you have AIDS as a disease, how did the West deal with AIDS in general? What was the first thing that they actually went on to do? Anybody? It's very easy answer.
Isolation from AIDS patients?
What was the strategy to do? What was it to do?
The first strategy was really like homophobia, so persecuting anyone who was participating in like homosexual intercourse.
Is that really how the West looked at AIDS in practical terms? To find a cure, right?
I mean, didn't they basically try to like mass test like people who had potentially?
But again, it goes back to finding a cure.
Yeah.
To the progress of after finding a disease is to find the cure to it, not to discuss the root cause of it. Why? Absolutely, that's one aspect, 100%. Yes. That's what you said. Definitely 100% probability. There's another.
I get what you're getting at. It's the same thing with like cancer and why so much money is fueled into the cancer curing industry. It's because if you can find a cure for that, you can eventually profit off it.
100%.
Same thing that like happened with what happened with insulin. You know, it started off as an open distribution, and then eventually it was capitalized on and used to profit off.
100%. That definitely. Sorry, 1 second. Definitely, profitability and making money out of pharmaceutical company is one of the biggest scams of capitalism. 100%. So think about it from a profitability perspective, but I want to think about it also from an intellectual perspective, from a philosophical perspective. When Africa faced the problem of AIDS, and specifically, there's a book about this. Was it Canada or I don't know? I forget the country now. I don't want to say it, even though I should know it. But they came up with a program called the ABC program to battle AIDS. What was the ABC program? Abstain, be loyal, and use protection. Meaning that this African country, to fix or to end the issue of AIDS, they looked at the root cause of it. The root cause what? Not being in a kosher, intimate relationship. Multiple partners, same gender relationship. That was the main root cause of AIDS. Correct? If you want to truly cure it, you have to go back to the root cause and say, you know what, this is the root cause, let's stop what caused it, and that will end it. Instead, they said, how can we cure it? Why? Because
So I just want to say that that AIDS is more of a engineered kind of a phenomenon. It was more planned to, not only infect but to distract everybody from actually finding out what the root cause actually is. So it gets more.
It could be, but in my humble opinion, I think those are conspiracy theories. And to me, the world is much simpler to explain than conspiracy theories. I think AIDS and other diseases are caused for whatever reason, but it might be. I don't want to deny that. I'm not an expert on it. My idea of this exercise, you can replace AIDS with another example, but the point of mentioning it was the the so-called rational way of thinking about it is that, look, people make choices in their intimate relationship. It's the S relationship, but I see a child, so I don't use that word. So they make choices. By rationally thinking, by rationally based morality, you can't tell people you can't be intimate with the same gender. You can't be telling people you should only have one partner. You can't tell people you can't have that intimate relationship outside of marriage. Why? Because once you do that, you are destroying and dismantling the rational, based morality that you have been created for the past 500 years. Let's take another small example. When you're eating so much fast food, a lot of this junk that we put in our body, there's a lot of acid that is built in our stomach, right? There's a very famous medication, I forget the name of it, but I'm sure most people know here. That is always prescribed when you have acid in your stomach. Anybody knows the name of it?
Omeprazole? Pepsid or omeprazole?
There's a lot of them actually.
Yeah.
But I think some of them, I forgot which one exactly, but was causing cancer, right? Which one was causing, what is it? It might be one of them. I'm meaning.
The medication.
Gastroesophageal reflux, and the acid over time breaks down your esophagus and leads to cancer.
We have a medical expert. I read some kind of medical stuff. So the idea was that, and this is the concept of what, as I mentioned, the progress doctrine. When there are certain foods, specifically fast food, that has a lot of material that is harmful to you, right? Instead of people in the state comes and say, listen, this specific food, this specific soda, this specific drink is causing harm to humans, right? It's causing you a lot of gas issues in your stomach. Instead of stopping that, what's the alternative? You create a medication that solves that for you. Go ahead and eat anything you want. So what you end up doing is two things. Number one, making money, pharmaceutical companies building more money. Multinational corporations that produce that food continue to make more money. Hospitals will continue to make money because that medicine has what? Secondary effects, side effects that will cause other diseases. And those other diseases will be made with more medication.
And also, I think that's why the psychiatric culture in our country is so bad, but because of the medications produced and the side effects that
100%.
they don't think of the holistic methods at all.
I love that you mentioned that. I was actually coming to that in a second, but thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, this is why physicians in this country, they're looked down upon if they try to, look at prevention, preventative cure, if they try to treat the patient holistically.
Love it.
Because the pharmaceutical industries have such a hold on the health in this country that they wouldn't.
Did you both have a look at my notes before you?
No, we work.
I love this. That means we're moving in the same direction and understanding that capitalism is not just that it's oppressive economic system that oppresses people and workers in China and Africa. Does it also lead to the colonialism in Africa to steal the gold and imperialism in the Middle East? So as Hillary Clinton, she said that we're going to Iraq for two reasons. Getting access to cheap oil, but number two, which is very important, it's not talked about a lot, opening a new market. Consumerism. And this is why in America, everything is being consumerized. Mother's Day, consumer holiday, Christmas is a holiday. Even Ramadan and Eid nowadays are being turned into consumerist mindset. Literally, this is what we do. Instead of Ramadan becoming like a religious and a holy thing that we train our body to fight consumerism, to fight materialism. Literally, the concept of Ramadan is to train on food to free yourself from materialistic needs. You fast during the day, but at night you do everything else that destroys everything you've been building all along. Because we are trained to think about consumerism and buying and spending. But this concept of what we talked about now, medication and AIDS, is the concept that, as I mentioned, there's two ways to look at it. From a modernity and secularism perspective, and this is why I mentioned all these theories, because they work hand in hand with capitalism. Capitalism is the economic system. Modernity is the philosophical understanding and point of view of the world. And you need them both to function. And they cannot function without each other. Because when you have, let's take a little bit further as an example. I gave the example of AIDS because of, I mentioned money, but also don't want to tell people how to live their life, because you want to get rid of divine and religious views of how to live your life outside of marriage. You should not be involved in anything else. Because Islam is about, it's about not just purity of the heart, but organizing the system. Because there's a lot of issues that come up if you do have intimacy outside of marriage. But why do we have psychology and therapy so much in demand in the West? Because of exactly, and this was supposed to be my wrap-up point, when you have capitalism that is turning us into consumerist animals. Literally all we do right now, anytime you think of something, you open your phone, you go to Amazon.com and you look for it. Or to fix that problem. This is why Americans are obsessed with Shark Tank. Come up with ideas and make money out of it. Because the idea is that we as human beings, the only thing that is eventually meaningful to us, the definition of falah, definition of salvation for Western worldview, is to be successful materialistically. Literally, this is why you had the Protestant and Catholic war. This is why I didn't bring it up randomly. Because the content was that, no, the salvation from a Protestant perspective is how much money I make, how much material and worldly success I make. In Islam, falah is what? It's the salvation on the day of judgment. And there's a clear path to it. Whether you felt rich or you're extremely poor means nothing. What matters is what you abide for and abide by the rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and live for that life. So capitalism, as an economic system, dismantles the concept of human dignity. Not only from a consumerist perspective, because everything to us is about money now. Even Islamic masajid and organizations right now, all they care about is how to fundraise more money. And by the way, don't quote me, take this the wrong way. We're supposed to be funding our masajid. We don't have a state that supports the masajid. You should be fundraising. So what I meant by that is not the masajid local. I'm talking about organizations that are constantly doing PR in a way to make you pay more money in a materialistic, consumerist, capitalist way. So linking this success and this falah in a capitalist mindset is how to make more money, how to be wealthy, and how to be rich. Now the ramification of that is in many folds. Number one, that is the oppression of people around the world. Today, when the phone costs $1,000 instead of it costing $5,000, it's because it's being produced by sweatshops in China. Africa today is living in poverty because of all the great resources that were stolen from Africa by so-called scrambled of Africa by European powers. The Middle East is being colonized. The people of Gaza are being committed genocide against because Israel wants to sell weaponry to the West, and they need to prove that their weapons actually work. They need to prove that their strategies of genocide that they sell to the European powers are actually working. So to them, Palestinians are just guinea pigs. They just want to test strategies and weapons on them. Of course, there's political reasons, but that's not the point of this conversation today. So imperialism, that I mentioned, Westphalia Treaty, New Trade Treaty, and the and the Berlin Conference. The reason why I mention these examples because they go hand in hand with capitalism. Because capitalism in the early days, they realized that the market and the labor that we have in Europe are not enough for us. Anytime anytime there is anything that is produced in the US, what is the first thing we think about? It's expensive. Because labor in the US is expensive because of the concept of American exceptionalism. That American people don't do something for cheap. But Chinese people can do something for cheap, so let's oppress the crap out of them. So this is on one aspect, where Europeans want to expand their markets by selling more product, producing more than we actually need. Why does every single person in a household need a laptop? Why does every little room in our houses have a TV? Not only is it for you to buy more stuff, but to bring in the concept of enlightenment, the concept of individualism. The one key factor of enlightenment, besides the rational thinking, is individualism. The concept of that your desires and your lusts are more important. This is what defines you as a human being. For you to fulfill your lusts and desires. In Islam, you're supposed to curb your lusts and desires, to control them, and only channel them in the right ways. And if you think about it, the marriage, the difference between marriage and girlfriend and boyfriend in the Western perspective, marriage to us means literally, forget about the piece of paper you sign. That's nothing. Back in the day, there was no pieces of paper. But marriage is you creating a system, you're creating a family, a system within the larger system, and you're telling people in the society moving forward, I am as a human being responsible for this new system, hold me accountable to it. That I'm creating a smaller system within the larger system to make sure that we continue to build that bigger system according to the divine laws. This is why we only exert our lust in the marriage. Islam is not against you being intimate, but if you do it outside of marriage, that means you're going to be causing a lot of problems. Not only in the sense of creating people outside of wedlock and then creating social issues and poverty, not only the issue of diseases that we know, there's a lot of other issues. But from a philosophical sense, when your desires lead you to just meet a new woman every day, then that dismantles the ideas of human dignity. Because you only can see women, and women can see men through lusts and desires. Otherwise, this is why in the West, there's a huge problem of marriage nowadays in the West, right? Nobody wants to get married. Why? Because getting married means that potentially if you get divorced, you lose half of your money, you're responsible, you need to have children, you need to do taxes and all. It's to them. What is it in it? What is it in it for me? Capitalism, profitability. You know what? I would rather have a girlfriend, or a girl would have a boyfriend. When I'm tired of them, just don't leave my house. Nothing, no ramification. Or the concept of friends with benefits. One night stand. It's a mindset. And this is why in Islam we have these systems in place to make sure that the divine rules are being protected, because if not, then the society will be destroyed. So number one of capitalism, one of the issues of capitalism, as I mentioned, the oppression, imperialism, colonialism, the killing, the genocide against natives in this land that killed millions of them. Number two, the dismantlement of the social fabrics, as I mentioned. You destroy the concept of human dignity. You destroy the concept of having social dynamics. Because this is very important. When we say that there is a fight against families, believe it. Because as I mentioned, family, the small family, the nuclear family, and extended families will hold the state accountable. Because at the end of the day, when you are fighting the state, you have your family to protect you. But when you are an individual by yourself, they will throw you in jail and nobody cares. When you have a family that you need to take care of, you need to be aware of the diseases and the medications and the impact of capitalism on me, the impact of policing, because that's my child, that's my aunt, that's my uncle. But if you divide people, it's easier to control. It's easier to sell an iPhone to every single person sitting here, versus if you have an extended family that has 20 people living in the same building and you only have 2 TVs. That's not profitable to capitalism. But it's also not good for the state. That means you have another moral system that exists within the larger moral system that is based on rational. Even if that smaller system, not based on religion, is based on the family system, the morality of that family. And that morality of the family can be against the morality that is being pushed by the state. So you have to dismantle that family to force the state moral canon. is that capitalism eventually literally leads, and when I talk about capitalism and modernity, I'm talking about all these Western ideas of so-called modernity and enlightenment, it can eventually lead to genocide. And this is what we're seeing in Gaza, and this is what we saw in the Holocaust. Do you think that the German police officers or army soldiers who committed that Holocaust and threw Jews and others in chambers and burned them alive, a lot of them will tell you what? I'm just following orders. When you are in a capitalist society that is dismantled, that you follow bureaucracy, that there is no divine ethical system that is above the rational, moral-based system, of course you will follow orders. Because at the end of the day, the only one who really decides whether I am a human being, whether I'm free or in prison, whether I'm alive or killed, is the state. If I don't follow orders, I have two options. Either I'm going to be thrown in jail, or I'll be killed. Or I'll be expelled from the home, from a nation state. So the German, to them, they had to make a choice. And this is the end goal, or not the end goal, but this is a ramification of capitalism and modernity. This is a serious problem. So when we say that the Holocaust happened to the Jews, that happened in Germany, yes, there was a lot of hate to Jews that existed in Europe for hundreds of years. They were prosecuted for hundreds of years, for decades, and for centuries. But the only way it would have been possible is by removing ethics and by turning people into individuals that can be controlled, because all they care about is money and lusts and desires. And there's no divine, ethical, morally based system that protects us against them. But if you come to a Muslim, I guarantee you, and you tell them, kill someone for no reason, I don't want to say all Muslims, the majority of Muslims will refuse. If you come to a father, or if you see these stupid videos on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube when they say they go to a boyfriend or girlfriend and tell them, would you cheat your girlfriend for $10,000? Or they want to measure that relationship by the value of money. Meaning, how much does your girlfriend mean to you? Eventually the guys will break out like 10K or 20K or whatever. But if you come to a Muslim who really abides by Islam, even if you pay them $1 billion, they will not do it. Or a Muslim woman will never do it. Why? Because to them, falah and success is not by money. It's by the ethics that is derived to us by Islam. And this is why Islam as a religion is a problem to the West. Because it cannot be secularized. Because to us, Islam is what defines us as human beings. It's the source of our human dignity. So I hope that makes sense. I try to connect instead of just focusing and unpacking capitalism, but to take a step back and understand capitalism from the social economic, but also from a historical development of the European thoughts that existed since the 16th century until today, that led to the many of these diseases that we talked about. And finally, because this was mentioned, and then I'll open space for questions and answers, because I think it was mentioned, it was very important. As a ramification, if you noticed lately, specifically by white people, there is a huge surge to Sufism and yoga and a lot of these Asian religions. Why? Specifically mystical ones. Because in their life, they're so crushed by working and being political at work and making money and not having family ties and drinking and lusts and all of that, that at one point they feel that there's an empty space inside of them. Something that is not satisfied, which is the nafs, which is the concept of sakina, the quietness, the tranquility that doesn't exist inside of them. Because everything is busy, working. They need that thing, and it's lacking. Instead of what? Instead of finding a solution by saying, you know what, no, maybe we shouldn't be living all of our life just to make money. Maybe there's something else, which is what we know as religion and spiritual connection. To them, they go to yoga. They create the concept of Sufi Islam. Just go a little bit, sing, dance, just connect with material life, and then go back to the rat race and be fine. But therapy is another example. A lot of people psychologically are broken. They lose their money, they lose their families, they work non-stop, women are single moms, husbands have so much bills to pay, they're busy with entertainment, all that nonsense, basketball, video games, whatever. Then eventually they realize that I'm broken, I don't have relationships, I don't know how to communicate with people, I don't have a family, I don't have a support system. Back home, therapy doesn't exist. And for the record, I'm distinguishing between people who have like mental health issues and just therapy at large. It's completely different. But we don't have the concept of therapy like we have it today because there's support systems. You go to your friends walk you through the problem. They help you find solutions. If you are homeless, somebody will take you. There's no concept of homelessness. There's somebody who will take care of you. But when you're living in a monstrous world that it's all about the money, you need somebody to help you feel human again. And therapy is becoming, unfortunately, as a business, which is similar to what I said about diseases of pharmaceutical companies. Now, this is the most recent cow of milking money and making money. Because every single human being is broken because of capitalism. Human beings are not created to live within capitalist lifestyle. That's not who we are. It's not how Allah created us. In Muslims, we have lists. That's our problem because we have a spiritual condition, but we still byproduct of capitalism, so we still face the same problem. So even therapy nowadays is unfortunately being made to make money out of, but it shows you that the human being, specifically the Western human being, is broken. And this is why you have the highest level of suicide are in the Western world, specifically in the highest developed countries. Why is that? That tells you something. The more money you have, the more relaxed you are, the more comfortable you are, the more you think of suicide. Because everything's about money but there's nothing that fits you spiritually. So you find other reasons for life, and unfortunately a lot of them, they don't know how to deal with it. Because this is how the Western thought is, so they unfortunately go to suicide. So I'll stop here. We have I promised to give 15 minutes of Q&A, but we have about 12 minutes, so I'll be quick, inshallah, in answering. I'll stop here. Jazakallah khair, and let me know if you have any questions or comments.
So, now going into the idea of being consumed by capitalism as a Muslim, how do we as Muslims connect back to Islam in this capitalist society, and how do we grow out of it once we do, go through our higher education and whatnot?
Very good question. They're very, very, very hard to answer. Capitalism, and I remember when I talked about liquid modernity and liquid stuff. Capitalism keeps changing according to the newest problems that exist in society. It's very hard to pinpoint. Like, we can simply say, you know what, just which a lot of Muslims do if you work in corporate America, when you do 401k, like, you make sure that you're not involved in anything that is interest-based, right? It's not limit-based. That's the simplest way of doing it. But there's a larger problem to it. Dealing with it at this moment is not something that I can talk about in a couple of minutes. It's something that needs sessions of philosophers and scholars and economics and socialists to sit down and actually find solutions to Muslims. But the best we can do, the simple answer that I can give you, is that we truly have to truly understand Islam as a way of life, not as a spiritual relationship between ourselves and God. Meaning, we have to understand that we are anti-consumerists. We are anti-capitalists. Life is not about making money and money only. We have to train our kids that the most important thing is not to be rich, to be a doctor and lawyer to make money. It's okay to teach them to be a doctor and lawyer to defend our people, but not to make money. This is very important, and this is a problem that we have. We are a byproduct of capitalism, unfortunately. It's hard to avoid it. Every single one of us either has an iPhone or an iPad or like a MacBook, which is based on oppression. Each one of us pays taxes to America. That's money sent overseas to kill people. So it's very hard to avoid it. The best we can do for now is to educate ourselves and the younger generation, to teach them that Islam is not about benefiting from everything in life, but just saying Bismillah before it. It's not Islam. This is a capitalist mindset of Islam. Islam is about truly understanding that capitalism, consumerism is something very dangerous for our soul, and we have to keep understanding and unpacking and dismantling by taking care of our families, by building a larger family, there's many solutions. A lot of people say maybe in the West it's hard, even overseas it's becoming very, very hard for now. The simplest thing for now to do is to really understand, I think from my perspective, is to understand Islam from that mindset. Personally, and I'm sorry for the brothers who recognize here and the sisters, I'm tired of the basic lessons that we have in our masajid. The Prophet did this, the Sahaba did this, battle this, battle that. That's okay, that's good, but that's not what Islam is about. And I want to end by saying this, and this is a huge problem we fall into. We compare Islam and Islamic history with, usually when we want to prove to the West that Islam is amazing by what? Islam created sciences and the moon and geometry and math. Sure, that's amazing. But did the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, the first the Khulafa al-Rashidun, did they build castles? Did they create books? Did they build wealth? Nothing. Maybe the only civilization on the face of earth that is so famous, so significant, that did not build massive buildings are Muslims. Everybody else you go to Rome and Italy, you see that these civilizations, what they built, or in Egypt or in Europe, Islam built a system that is supposed to ready us to dignify humans and to teach us how to live our lives away from materialism. This is what Islam is about. Now, how to find a balance between that and being completely rejecting everything in life, they need to find a balance. How? I think this is something that like organizations like MAS and USAID and whatnot can teach you how to navigate and come up with systems. For example, in corporate America, you have to go to happy hour to connect. Most people get promoted by meeting offline, by your manager being loose, and then you can have a conversation and maybe get your promotion eventually. Of course, I'm oversimplifying, but you have to be engaged somehow in something that is haram, unfortunately. So building that momentum and building our identity and stopping the need to prove that Islam is also modern. No, Islam is not modern. By modern, I don't mean we live in the 21st century. It means modernized in the concept of Europe, that you get rid of the divine and you think about the rational. Once you build that confidence, then we're able to build alternative solutions. But as long as we keep saying that fasting is healthy for you, and you pray in Fajr and Jama'ah, you walk out and the breeze does something chemically to you, we're not on the right track. By the way, I'm not saying that fasting is cannot be helpful for you, or waking up in the morning is not helpful for you. I'm not saying that. Even when you do salah 5 times a day, sure, you're moving your muscles, good, but that's not why it was created. Fasting was created so you can train your body to get rid of materialism, so you can be ready to fight for Islam, literally. Salah is for you to keep disconnecting with materialism and connect